Okay, so in the last lecture we talked about, Marquis' account of the wrongness of killing. Now in this lecture I want to see how he applies this account to the issue of abortion. Marquis is going to say that abortion is seriously immoral once we see why killing is wrong. So Marquis never quite puts it this way, but I think we can sort of distill Marquis' argument into something like this, put it in this premise, conclusion form. So premise one, what makes killing wrong is that it deprives us of a valuable future. Deprives the person killed of a good future, a valuable future. So killing a being wrong, and wrong in the same way as killing normal adult human, when it deprives that being of a future like ours. Premise 3, abortion deprives the fetus of a future like ours. If the fetus were left to develop, it would eventually, in most cases, have a future like ours. Abortion deprives it of that, so that's what makes abortion wrong. Premise 4, just a neat result. Neat in the sense of, clean, it follows from it. Abortion morally wrong. In fact, it's morally wrong way in the same way that killing an adult human being is, or killing a child is for that matter. Now, Marquis does not talk about legality, but I think if you buy this theory, it's very hard to deny that abortion should be heavily legally restricted, if not outright banned in most cases. Why? Well, if it's wrong in the way that killing another human being, killing an adult human being or a child is wrong, well, that certainly seems like a good reason to put legal restrictions on it. It would be hard to say that there shouldn't be legal restrictions. So if we buy that, I think it's very hard not to say, well, abortion should be illegal, or at the very least, heavily legally restricted. Well, what do we think of Marquis' argument? Well, look, so one thing you might say, look at the premises, one thing you might say is, well, is it always true that all of these premises are true? And you might say, well, look, there's a lot of cases, maybe not relatively a lot of cases as, considering the absolute number of pregnancies, but there are a lot of imaginable cases where the fetus does not have a future like ours, and so abortion would not deprive it of a future like ours. There are birth defects that would result in incredibly severe mental impairment, right? Most of the brain, except for the brainstem, might be missing. What would you say in a case like that, Marquis? Fetus doesn't have a future like ours. It's never, even if born, it's never going to have, our level of mental ability or mental life. Nothing even close. Or what about genetic diseases where the fetus would die at a very young age, maybe even die very painfully, right? One that comes to my mind, the one that comes to my mind first is Tay-Sachs. Fetus dies at a very young age. Well, I think Marquis would just say abortion is not wrong in those cases. If the fetus has a future like ours, it's wrong to abort it. But in some of these cases, it doesn't have a future like ours, and if it doesn't have a future like ours, abortion is perfectly morally permissible on Marquis' theory. And I think he would have no trouble admitting it. In exceptional cases, like severe, heavy cognitive impairment, just no brain that allows higher functions, or genetic diseases that will kill the fetus as a very young infant if it's born, then I think Marquis would say abortion, it's not wrong to kill the fetus in these cases. It doesn't have a future like ours. You're not depriving it of a valuable future. Abortion is morally permissible in these cases. But I think Marquis would say these cases are relatively rare. Most abortions are not done for these reasons, I think Marquis would say. These abortions, severe birth defects of some kinds, genetic diseases that will kill the fetus before it ever reaches, gets out of infancy, yes, those cases make abortion permissible. Those are relatively rare. The same goes for other cases where maybe the pregnancy, something has happened and it's incredibly unlikely the mother can carry it to the point of viability. If something's happened and they say, well, this is not going to result in a successful pregnancy, let's do an abortion for the mental and physical health of the mother, do this in a controlled situation, I think Marquis would just say, doesn't have a future like ours, killing it not wrong, abortion permissible in these cases. Well, what about cases where the mother can carry the fetus to viability, viability meaning the ability to survive outside the womb, but doing so would threaten her life? I think there's two things to say about cases like this. One thing is just, in the real world, philosophers are great at cooking up weird, far out there hypotheticals. We'll see this when we talk about Thompson in the next lecture. In the real world, cases like this are just going to be incredibly rare. Cases where the mother's life is threatened by the pregnancy are going to be cases where it's relatively unlikely she can carry it to the point of viability. But let's suppose, I'm sure there might be a few cases like this. What would Marquis' theory say in cases like that? I think in cases like that, self-defense would probably allow for abortion. We tend to think that it's pretty rare where it's okay to kill another human being, but in cases where they are threatening our lives, we do tend to think it might be permissible. Now, in a lot of cases of self-defense, the other person has to have bad intentions, but we can imagine cases where self-defense is allowable when they don't, right? I think of a scene from this movie, The Hurt Locker, where this one poor innocent guy has a bomb strapped to him and he's wandering toward this group of soldiers. And, this person's innocent. He doesn't want to kill them, but he wants the bomb off, but it's about to go off. In this case, it does seem like it would be permissible to kill this guy to keep him from killing them, even though he doesn't have bad intentions, right? And there are other cases, I won't bore you guys with this, but in just war theory, a lot of just war theory rests on the idea, well, that soldiers on the other side might not be bad people, they might not have bad intentions, but due to the threat they create to you and your country, in some cases, killing might be justifiable. All this makes me think that, if killing in self-defense in these cases is justified, if the mother's life is very seriously threatened, I think we can argue self-defense, even on an account like Marquis, would probably allow an abortion. Killing in self-defense, permissible, even of other human beings where they're clearly killing is wrong. So I think when the mother's life's threatened, we can make these claims about self-defense. So, Marquis' position, I think it would allow abortion in some cases. severe defects or genetic diseases that deprive the fetus of a future like ours. Cases where the mother can't carry it to term and it doesn't have a future like ours. Cases where the mother's life is seriously threatened because even if something does have a future like ours, killing might be allowed in self-defense. But generally, where things like that don't hold, then Marquis' position is going to be abortion is seriously immoral and it should be illegal, or at the very least, heavily legally restricted. Okay, so that is Marquis' argument for the wrongness of abortion. In the next few lectures, we'll look at an argument for the pro-choice position. And an argument that, interestingly, probably won't, or I think certainly won't deny any of the claims that Marquis makes about the wrongness of killing, but still argues that even if we admit this, there should still be a right to an abortion, and that abortion is maybe not immoral and certainly not seriously immoral in the way Marquis thinks. All right. So we'll talk about that in the next couple of lectures when we talk about this argument by Thompson for a right to an abortion.